I call the August 19th Building and Lands Committee meeting to order at 6 p.m. Everybody can please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, let the record show that all members of the committee are present. Councilman Abens, Councilwoman Swank, and Chairman Winkle. Other members of council currently present are Councilwoman Awig, Council President Jacobs, Councilman Schaefer, and Council Clerk Weber. And from the administration, we have Law Director Moriarty and Economic Development Director Kim Lieber is here with us today. The previous minutes before us, we had the Building and Lands Committee minutes of March 4th, 2024. Is there any correction to those minutes? Hearing none, those minutes are approved as written. Today, we are here to discuss 2024-78, an ordinance amending Chapter 830 Home Occupations of the North Ridgeville Business Regulation and Taxation Code. We did receive an email from Director Lieber about this a few weeks ago. I think for the record, I'm just going to throw the bullet points of your email into the record. So without reading the email's entirety, I'm just going to put some of the bullet points of the email we received. Some of the highlights of the proposed changes are to add the expressly prohibited uses, those types of uses not compatible with residential neighborhoods, reinforce that home occupations should not change the residential character of the dwelling, reinforce that home occupations are to be contained in the dwelling, home occupations are not to be conducted in accessory buildings, specifically state that home occupations may not involve outdoor storage of materials, goods, supplies, or equipment, provide limits on hours of the day when the traffic may be generated by home occupations, change permit fee to application fee so funds are collected at the time of application to cover costs of administrative review, allow the chief building official to place conditions of permit approval to guard against adverse impacts unique to a particular home occupation, update the penalty language to avoid conflict with state law. I think we also removed language about when there was renewals at one point that's no longer in place. So I just wanted to just add that to the meeting minutes, and I'd like to turn it over to you, Ms. Lieber, to give us an explanation or add to that or whatever you'd like.
Thank you, Chairman. By way of background, council is familiar that we're undergoing a zoning code diagnosis and an update process. So home occupations is one area we've identified that we probably needed to fold into the zoning code in the future, but currently exists in business regulations. But because we had fielded a number of complaints about businesses being run out of residential dwellings, it kind of caused this issue to bubble up a little bit more quickly than our zoning code update would allow us to tackle. So as we started reviewing the concerns and questions raised about businesses in residential districts, it caused us to look at both those types of businesses that should and should not be locating in residential areas. Those that shouldn't, we're working with the building department and law department to ensure that we could help bring those property owners into compliance. But in some cases, we found that, we do require a home occupation permit, although we haven't granted probably many of those over the years since this went into place. And yet a lot of people do conduct business out of their homes. So we discussed the need to conduct a more broad education campaign. Oftentimes we only learn about these things secondhand, either complaint basis or just in conversation with a property owner when they call us asking if they need a permit or approval. So we thought it would be a good idea to, blast some more information out through a newsletter, Facebook post about the home occupation permit. But before we did that, we thought we should lay eyes on that current code section. And we saw a couple areas of deficiency, which Councilman Winkle outlined in those bullet points, which we thought it would be in the city's best interest if we address prior to having all these potential flood of people come and request home occupation permits. So really a clarifying of language. There, again, has been this permit requirement in place, it appears, since the ordinance went into effect in 2006. But we're trying to more expressly define what types of activities are or aren't compatible with home occupations, which we thought there is a couple holes in our current regulation, and we just wanted to be a bit more explicit and give the city a bit more control and authority. But to note that these changes do not affect anyone with an existing permitted home occupation. So if someone has a home occupation and it's of a type that might be prohibited in the future, they can continue to operate their home occupation under their current permit. And also to note that home occupation permits are not transferable. So they are with that business when that business either relocates or goes out of business, it doesn't stay with the property. So it's not like a variance in that situation. So I thought that was important to point out. But if council has specific questions about some of the changes we made or what we're trying to do, I'd be happy to try to answer your questions.
Thank you. A couple things. I went through this and went before and after on the ordinances. Seems like a couple of regulations that are no longer be allowable. And correct me if I missed any or if I'm misrepresenting it, but tow truck services, animal care and boarding facilities, contractor storage yards, machine shops, and industrial uses, and then toxic, flammable, combustible, explosive, corrosive, harmful chemicals. I think those were added in prohibited areas that we didn't have before, which makes sense to me. Going further, you also added that the chief building official may impose conditions to mitigate potential issues, which you didn't have the ability to before, correct? So that he can, this is a unique situation, let's put something to bear on this condition that we can ensure it doesn't, it continues to comply, I should say. And there's no renewals, I see that, so it's basically, it carries with the owner, right, not the property, so it's not like a BZA application. So if an owner were to sell it to a family member or nothing, it still would not transfer, correct?
In the same dwelling, same business, new owner?
Same dwelling, different owner, I mean, does it just go by ownership, period? Like, so if you sold it to your kids, or is this a question I had, if we wanted to add something to define that or not in there?
Before I answer off the cuff, I'll see what we wrote.
Yeah, I'm looking it up right now, too.
Director, I would interpret that as a new owner, whether it's your son, daughter, or wife, it's still a new owner.
I don't see that that's specifically addressed, but a permit is issued for a home occupation to the person, the applicant. So if the applicant were to change, my instinct would be that a new permit would need to be issued to that new applicant.
Right, because it would make sense to me, because it says here, no permit issued under the provisions of this chapter may be sold within the premises or dwelling form, or on which the home occupation is being conducted, nor may it otherwise be sold, conveyed, or assigned to any party other than the premises named therein, the permittee named therein, I'm sorry. So I would think, yeah, I guess, so that way everybody knows, like, if you did sell it to a relative, they're gonna have to start over again, which is really a minor thing. I think the permit's $50 and you make sure you're complying with our ordinances and you're good to go. I'd like to say that I think it's not gonna affect most of the people that are having these home permits. This is the prohibited regulation, the prohibited uses will be the key. I know we've gotten some complaints over the years about it. Any members of the committee have any questions or comments?
Yes, through the chair. I have a question on the application fee of $50. Is that non-refundable? It doesn't specify.
If we
830.03 on page 2.
It would be, the application fee would be non-refundable if staff has done the work to review the application. If it's denied, for example, we still collect the application fee. Presently, it's a permit fee, so we intake the application, do the review, and then at the time of issuance, we collect the money, but in some cases, we're still doing that administrative work. So we thought from a procedural standpoint, better to collect the application fee so that when we have approved a permit, that we can issue it right away and then don't have to have the applicant come in a second time to pay the fee. We can just email them the application, and then it still covers the administrative review cost. So we thought that was a better way to go in this particular case.
Okay, and then my second question, you said that if they currently have a permit to do the business, do we have any businesses that do not have a permit, and what are we going to do with that situation?
There are businesses that do not have home occupation permits. Again, we're going to engage in a bit of an education campaign, so we'll be using our newsletter and social media to put the information out. Where we are aware of a home occupation that is not on our list of permits, we've discussed putting together just a friendly kind of informational form letter of like, dear resident, did you know that a home occupation permit's required? And, sometimes you'll see things represented on Google, like they might say a business is located here, but that's not always up to date or current. It might not be the right address. It might be a different person. So, our goal is not to be heavy-handed about this. It's to just encourage voluntary compliance. And if a situation arises where we get a complaint that there is a business being run and we don't have a record of a permit or approval, then we'll pursue it through our normal course of enforcement.
Thank you.
All right. Any other council members have any comments or questions? Mr. Schaefer?
I was wondering, does this apply to, or would it cause any trouble with internet-based home businesses, like people selling stuff on Amazon and eBay and things of that nature? They tend to generate a lot more traffic. I know on Route 83, there's always an Amazon truck blocking the side of the road, UPS, Federal Express, stuff like that. Does this apply to that?
I think, as staff, we're going to probably field a lot of questions of like, does this ordinance apply to this particular type of business? And we'll have to read the code carefully. Really, how it's defined now, any profession or business conducted in a residential dwelling is accessory to the principal residential use thereof. So, I guess I would say yes. So, and, but when it gets to certain things like, well, I have a pampered chef party once a year, like, okay, no. So I think we're going to have to use some administrative discretion if someone calls, and then we'll probably wind up asking questions of, is this an everyday, how often are you engaging? Give us a little bit more information about the nature of your business to guide you if a permit in this case is required. But it does sound like if there's trucks that are coming to neighborhoods or properties more often because someone's, kind of drop shipping or doing something like that, it does sound like it has a potential for a neighborhood impact. So it probably would be the kind of thing where we would want to review it and issue a permit and potentially place some restrictions to ensure it doesn't have a negative impact on neighbors.
To add to that, I guess you have, excuse me, in 830.02B10, you have a restriction on vehicles, including street parking, which you could tie to that as opposed to if there was becoming an issue in a neighborhood because someone's getting 30 Amazon trucks a day or something.
Or it could just be like my house. Feels like that way sometimes.
They call them Amazon diets, I heard. Any other council members, any questions or comments?
I was kind of curious, does it apply to Mary Kay and Tupperware, people like that have these parties where they sell stuff at their house? Is that more of a frequency thing, or?
Again, if it's a business conducted in a residential dwelling, I imagine those that might have parties also have just the retail sales business or a consulting business. So I would say likely yes, that those businesses would require a permit to operate.
And I'll add again, I have personal experience with this, so it's pretty simple to do. You just go in there and you just work it out, get your permits, and it's good forever. There's no renewals. You don't have to do anything other than just comply. So it might sound more intimidating than it is. So a public awareness campaign is good because it's really not a big deal at all to get it done. It's super simple. Anybody else have any questions or comments?
Through the chair, question I have, one person I know of used the excuse, I've been grandfathered in, because he's been there for quite a while. But my understanding is these zoning codes go back to somewhere around 1960. So it's pretty hard to believe that they've been grandfathered in.
Grandfathering is a term we use in zoning. So, we can go back in time and generally identify when a property was zoned to a certain use or a certain district, and then what uses are permitted in that district. So we should be able to fairly determine if a business is being conducted out of a residential dwelling that's not a home occupation, was it grandfathered or not grandfathered. This is a bit different. So the home occupation section is in our business regulations. And so back in 2006, council decided that there should be some kind of procedure in order to identify folks that work out of their home. But again, working out of their home in a way that doesn't change the residential character of the property. So there's a big difference between maybe selling Mary Kay versus you have turned your backyard into a wood shop and you're producing furniture and, trucks are coming in and out and people are, you have sales on Saturdays or what have you. So it's really a different level of intensity and use where one, we would say the use of the property is business. In this case, we're saying the use is definitely residential. There's just an accessory business activity happening there. So I wouldn't say that like grandfathering applies to the home occupation permit. Once council made this requirement, it would apply to anyone who had a home occupation. Didn't matter if your home occupation was already in existence, you're still required to get a permit under this ordinance.
I think to add to that, I think the oldest version of this is 2006. So you can tell them that at least it's not from the 60s. So since 2006, you should have been doing something along these lines. Any other council members? Anything else from administration? So,
To the chair?
Yes.
Just one more question.
sure.
Would this apply to churches? If you wanted to start a church out of your house that meets every Sunday? Because that could generate a lot of traffic.
So the principal use is still a dwelling because churches are permitted uses in residential districts. However, they would have to go through a planning commission process because of the use and the traffic generated. We'd have to look at the question of, is it a business though, depending on the number of vehicles. Again, like you can only attract 2 vehicles. So again, if you kind of get to the point where you are exceeding the home occupation permit requirements, but you could consider under the residential district standards, is the property a church? But then you have to follow the planning commission review process and then have a development plan and sufficient parking lot and all those things that would come along with that kind of a development.
So it'd be a house or a church, but you're not both. A house with 20% of your
Right,
place with 2 cars.
Right.
Or you're a church.
right.
Okay.
Okay.
Through the
Go ahead.
chair.
Yes.
That could be easily challenged, as you're well aware. Because of being religious, it starts to bump into the First Amendment of the Constitution. So it's going to be, if that ever occurs, it's going to be a very touchy, difficult area to enforce.
Just make sure everybody fits in 2 cars that comes in. Okay, so I'd like entertain a motion.
I'll move to send ordinance 2024-78 back to city council for consideration.
Second,
Okay, it's moved by Swank and a second by Abens to send 2024-78 back for council for consideration. All in favor, say yes.
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 All opposed, it will be sent back to council for further consideration. Before we stop, President Jacobs, were we going to try to add this to tonight's agenda?
Yeah, I think because we've now had our committee meeting and just to move this through the legislative process, I was going to make a motion at the council meeting to dispense with the bylaws and amend our agenda, adding this to tonight's agenda under second readings.
So we'll be added under second readings with no request for emergency, just to be added on so we can,
Continue on.
2 more weeks of delay gone on it. So, all right. Well, seeing no other business beforehand, there's no audience to pull. This meeting is adjourned.